So first question would be, you are about to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. What are you going to discuss and what advice will you give to him?
Well, it's interesting. We started our day meeting with the new Prosecutor General. And I think we're all mindful of the fact that President Zelenskyy won an amazing mandate from the people of Ukraine to rid this country of corruption. We also attended the opening session of the High Anti-Corruption Court. And I thought President Zelenskyy's speech was excellent, and he made the point that we're not just going to fight corruption, we're going to defeat corruption. And so I think that's really, what one of our main topics is, the challenge that he's going to be facing. None of this is easy. Democracy is not easy. It took America decades. We're still trying to form a more perfect union. So this is extremely difficult, but he has an amazing mandate from the Ukrainian people, the courage they've shown on the Maidan and ever since. And we're just here to basically support the Ukrainian people.
It's wonderful to be back here in Ukraine. I was here during the height of the protests in late 2013 on the stage of the Maidan with Senator McCain. I miss him, but I'm so proud of this ongoing revolution of dignity in which people all across Ukraine have decided to stand up over and over again to demand that they live in a truly sovereign and free country. And I'm glad that we're partners. Ukraine has support from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. We fight about lots of issues in Washington, but there are few that unite us in a manner more so than our support for Ukraine. And so I was encouraged today by all of this robust focus on anti-corruption efforts. There's been a lot of talk in this area, a little bit of progress, I think now some serious movement, and we're both looking forward to meeting the president. My first time. I know Senator Johnson has met with him prior, and we hope to be partners with him.
Speaking of anti-corruption initiatives, the U.S. has supported the previous government in establishing the anti-corruption bodies and so on. Do you have a feeling that with the new parliament, the new government, the anti-corruption reforms will go faster? Because the U.S. has also criticized the pace of these reforms before.
I would say in our discussions with the new Prosecutor General and the Chief Justice of the High Court and all the other representatives we've spoken to so far, the Ukrainian government, there is a dedication to carrying out that mandate to, again, defeat corruption. So I have no doubt that the dedication is going to be there, the effort's going to be there, the will is going to be there. And we've also been working with our charge d'affaires here, the embassy staff. They are fully on board. They want to be completely supportive, working with our Ukrainian partners to, again, complete the mandate, fulfill the mandate that the Ukrainian people gave to this new administration.
There has been this robust support from Congress. We've appropriated over the years hundreds of millions of dollars into the billions. But in the last few years, to be honest, occasionally there have been some of our colleagues who question the pace of reform here. And I think it's so important for us to be able to come back to the United States and make this case that this is a new day and these anti-corruption efforts are real. The people who've stolen money from this country are going to be held accountable. And that will make it a lot easier for us to be able to prevail on our colleagues to continue the economic, political, and military support for Ukraine.
How do you assess the first steps of Ukrainian parliament, given that there was very rapid pace of changing the constitution, also lifting the immunity? How do you assess these first steps? Are there any concerns about them?
Well, first of all, I think the election result was quite amazing. That took some real guts on President Zelenskyy's part to really put his mandate on the line just a couple months after he won the election to make sure he had the partners in the parliament to pass the laws. And I think the strongest indication is they passed a constitutional amendment that does not exempt members of parliament from the anti-corruption laws. So that's a very positive first step, and I know they have a very aggressive agenda over the next few months.
It's probably not very different than the American system. When new presidents come into power, they want to get as much done as they can at the beginning of their tenure. It's when they have the most wind at their back. And so I don't blame President Zelenskyy and his new majority in the Rada for attempting to do the same thing. We're certainly there to support them.
Ukraine, Poland, and the US have signed a memorandum of sales of liquefied natural gas from America to Ukraine. Is it a breakthrough of new Ukrainian parliament, or is it rather a continuation of the cooperation already established by the previous one?
Listen, I don't know whether it's a breakthrough or not, but we've got to have a comprehensive plan to be able to secure the long-term energy independence of Ukraine, but also of Europe as well. Senator Johnson and I have not really understood Europe's interest in participating in a new gas route from Russia into the continent, not just because it may harm Ukraine in the short run, but because it harms Europe in the long run, making this entire continent more and more reliant on a product that comes from Russia. LNG is part of the solution, but so has to be renewable energy sources. Other countries have done better than Ukraine on this, and that has to be part of their package moving forward as well. I'd love to see the United States, get into the business of, doing more than just providing advice, actually providing some financing vehicles. And Senator Johnson and I actually have legislation that would help the United States finance more energy independence projects, whether they be LNG or wind and solar. That would be, I think, an important piece of legislation for Congress to pass.
And of course, one of the main reasons you have to defeat corruption, adhere to the rule of law, respect private property, is those are basically table stakes for foreign investment to come into any country. And so that's, again, one of the real challenges, but that's going to be the benefit to this really war, I think, that this administration is going to wage on corruption in this country.
What are the other aspects of economic cooperation that U.S. plans to maybe further in Ukraine? What are the sectors of economy that might be of interest?
Well, in order to have a strong economy, you first have to have a safe and secure country. And the extent that Russia has destabilized the situation here in Ukraine, illegally annexing Crimea, invading eastern Ukraine, has certainly put a real pinch on the Ukrainian economy. So from my standpoint, I do want to make sure that the U.S. continues to support the Ukrainian military in their courageous effort to push back Russia's aggression and hopefully come to what I believe is President Zelensky's top goal, is to end that conflict in eastern Ukraine.
We're big supporters of more robust economic cooperation between Ukraine and the United States, but the United States isn't China. We don't have state-directed industries. And so what our mission is to try to help Ukraine become more hospitable for private investment. American companies are going to be here in Ukraine if they believe that they are going to get a fair shake. They're going to be able to get a return on investment in this country. And without more progress on anti-corruption efforts and rule of law efforts, then you're just not going to have the interest from American companies. And so that's why I think our focus is so clearly on this issue of continued governance reform, because that is what will allow for American companies to be interested in showing up and being more present in Ukraine, which is something we want.
You already touched on China relations. Right now, as Ukraine has good relations with both China and America, given also the possible contracts of selling Motor Siege and others, how these relations might affect the cooperation with the U.S. in case we have arms sales, for instance, to China, how to balance it?
Well, Ukraine should have good relations with the United States and China. I just would, be careful about some of the products that the Chinese may be offering here. We've had some strong feelings, for instance, on what tools may be available to China, for instance, if they get control of your country's high-speed internet system, that you may not want to be in a position in which the Chinese have control of that important set of technologies. So I think that we want countries that we are allies with economically to be able to do business with China, but just to have eyes wide open as to the sectors that you are allowing China to become dominant in.
There are serious strings attached to China's investment in some of these countries, and some countries are starting to understand that. We're watching right now what China is doing in terms of putting pressure on the freedom-loving people of Hong Kong. So I agree with Senator Murphy. I would advise the Ukrainians to be very careful in their relationship or a growing relationship, economic, technologically, with China, because there are some very serious strings attached.
Ukraine has enjoyed the bipartisan support from the U.S. for a long time. Now some analysts say that Ukraine might possibly be dragged into the U.S. Domestic political disputes. I'm talking about the visits of personal lawyer of Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, his meetings with Ukrainian high top officials. What do his actions, what challenges do his actions pose before the Ukrainian government?
Well, I think that Ukraine has to be very careful about taking any actions that could be perceived even to be impacting an American election. Obviously, we have gone through a tumultuous investigation in the United States, which has uncovered tremendous interference in a United States election by another power, and I just don't think that is not Ukraine's intent. I just don't think you want any perception as a friend or an ally of the United States of trying to be a player or an actor in a U.S. election. And that is good advice for every country, not just Ukraine.
I think it has been remarkable how strong and unanimous the support in Congress has been for, again, the courageous people here of Ukraine. I do not see that changing. Americans want to help people throughout the world, those nations that are aspiring for freedom, for a capitalist system, for safety, security, peace, prosperity for themselves and their families. So we're going to be here, and we're going to continue to be supportive of Ukraine.
You have touched on the security issues. Do you have a feeling that with the new government, the security cooperation between the states will enhance? If we compare with the experience with the previous Ukrainian government?
Well, again, I think we will remain steadfast. We'll continue to support Ukraine, and I can speak for our first branch of government, the United States Congress. We are unanimous in our support for the courage of the Ukrainian people.
I think Senator Johnson's right. We are committed, Republicans and Democrats, to this security cooperation. We're proud to have U.S. personnel here doing important training missions. We've been proud to support some really important investments in the military. We know that there's been a lot of attention here on the president's suspension of security aid. We don't know what the final determination will be from the administration, but I think the president knows that there is broad bipartisan support for continued aid and support for lifting what we hope is a temporary hold on this important security funding for Ukraine.